The most frightening truth is not that they touched the fire but that they never realized they themselves were burning. And you, the chosen one, stood in the middle of it all, quietly witnessing what so few have the depth to see. From the very first moment, everything around you carried a strange kind of silence. A silence not born of weakness but the kind that lives in mountains right before an eruption tears open the sky. Some people looked at that stillness and thought you were fragile, delicate, that one touch could break you into pieces. They did not know that the strongest lands of creation always carry sleeping veins of fire within them. Your silence was not a flaw. It was a cloak that hid the depth of your soul, something they could never measure with words or sound because they never learned how to hear the things that are not spoken. They came to you with soft smiles, then left with whispers sharper than blades. They never thought their actions carried weight. They never asked themselves whether something beneath their feet was shifting. They believed only in surfaces, in the glow on the outside, in your quiet lack of response. And when you did not strike back, did not collapse, did not play the role they wrote for you, they assumed you had lost. Each of them believed they had seen your limits, as if they had the right to define you by the shallowness of their own minds. But you knew what they did not. You knew there are battles fought in silence, collisions of the soul that no one but you can hear. You stood there letting them think they had won, while in truth they were only cracking the very ground they stood on. You did not need to speak, you did not need to explain. Your stillness was the answer. One evening, while the world was busy with empty stories, a line from Psalm 25:14 rose in your mind. God reveals his covenant to those who fear him. The words came not as a promise but as confirmation. As if the universe bent low to whisper in your ear that you are not alone, that you are not walking in the dark by yourself, and that nothing around you is random. There are invisible covenants that only the soul can feel, not through sight, not through sound, but through the deepest vibration inside the quiet space of the heart. When they spoke about you, they laughed. When they spoke about you, they added things you never did, never said, never thought. They twisted you into a distorted image so they could tear you apart more easily. But in that very time, you did not shrink. You did not fade. You simply stepped out of their reach. And with every step you took, every steady breath you held, the fire they thought had destroyed you began to burn in a way they never wanted to see. Some believed you would break when they left. Some believed you would fall when they twisted the story. Some believed you would stay down in pain when the rumors spread like waves. But you did not fall. You did not break. You did not sink. The only thing that trembled then was the image they had created of themselves. Because when they stood before you, they saw themselves weaker, more fragile, more afraid, and they tried to throw all of that onto you the way someone casts their own shadow onto the wall in front of them. In those quiet days, you began to see more clearly. You recognized the motives hidden beneath gentle words, the sharpened edges behind smiles, the calculating nods. You realized that not everyone who stands close is a companion. Some hands touch you not to lift you but to search for your weaknesses. Not everyone who listens actually cares. Some ears are only waiting to gather your story and turn it into a weapon. But what confused them most was that you did not fight back. They wanted you to react, to lose control, to get angry so they could have more reasons to say you were exactly what they claimed. They wanted a loud battle, they wanted to push you into a clash they could manipulate. But you did not step onto the stage they built. You did not return the words they threw at you. You stayed quiet, and that quiet unsettled them. You became a mirror that refused to reflect what they expected. And in that refusal, what they had been hiding began to show through the cracks in their own disguise. Slowly, one by one, they began to sink into the very trenches they had carved. From fake words to shady actions, everything became hidden pathways leading directly to their downfall. They blamed you. They blamed circumstances. They searched for excuses. But deep inside, they knew what was coming was not because of you but because of the seeds they planted, believing they would never grow. You stood there in the gentle morning light, watching life unfold according to laws no one can rewrite. You did not rejoice in their collapse, but you understood. You understood that no one can escape the things they create. You understood that your silence was not a loss. It was how you let the universe answer for you with a justice that human hands cannot bend. And you understood the most important truth. They never burned you. They only revealed the light you once hid beneath the ashes. You are still here standing strong with a strength no one can take away. And that journey, the journey of the chosen one, has only just begun. You only need to keep walking, because what comes next is not fear but the awakening of your own life. And as that journey began to open, you started to feel more clearly the subtle movements around you, as if the mist that once blinded your eyes was slowly lifting to reveal the true structure of everything that had been happening all along. The stories they created about you were not only meant to hurt you, they were also a way for them to hide from facing the darkness within themselves. Every whisper they released in the shadows carried the same nature. They needed you to weaken so they could feel stronger. But you, standing at the center of it all, did not waver before their faint echoes. You looked back at every face that once appeared, every smile offered more as a social ritual than sincerity. Those people believed they understood you, that you were nothing more than what their eyes could see, that you were a thin wooden door they could push down with a few well-timed jabs. That was why when you stayed silent they assumed you had accepted defeat. They thought you had taken the hit they had long been waiting to give. They measured your strength by their own, and that was the mistake that led their path into a dead end. In that quiet space you were not broken. Instead you began to see farther, sharper and more clearly. Not because you wanted to judge anyone, but because hurt has a way of widening the eyes of the soul. Things you once overlooked, small things, a raised eyebrow, a shift in the air, a passing comment that once seemed harmless now appeared in their full shape. You saw the fractures in people who believed they were flawless. You saw the trembling in their chest each time you appeared, not because you threatened them but because your presence exposed what they tried to hide in the dark. As everything became clearer to you, something else began to surface. Those who mocked your pain were stepping into that very territory themselves. Someone lost their job right after spreading stories about you. Someone suddenly faced isolation from the very groups they once led. Someone drowned in losses they could not admit were born from their own actions. They blamed bad luck, changing people, the unfairness of life, but none of them faced the truth that life was returning what they had thrown out. It was not something you wanted. It was not something you waited for. But you knew the world moves in ways no one can escape. You did not demand justice because justice does not need to be demanded. It always finds the one who calls it through actions, thoughts and choices. And when justice arrives, it does not knock on doors like a polite guest. It sweeps in like an unexpected wind, carrying away everything built on hollow ground. In that moment, when the burdens you once carried began to return to those who created them, your soul quietly remembered a verse from long ago, like a gentle hand resting on your shoulder in the dark. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. The words of Psalm 37:4 appeared not as a miracle but as a soft exhale. They reminded you that throughout all the misunderstanding, the blame and the isolation, you never walked alone. Someone saw you, understood you, and knew every word you never spoke. And then something strange happened. Their gaze changed. Not because they felt remorse, but because fear began to bloom. They could not understand why everything they threw at you returned to them so quickly. They could not understand why you remained standing while their foundations shook. They could not understand why your smile did not disappear. And that confusion shook them so deeply they could no longer hold the confidence they once displayed. The irony was simple. All this time you were not trying to shine. You simply refused to go dark. But in their eyes, that alone was enough to become a threat. They could not handle your silence, because in that silence everything they hid beneath their masks began to appear like bold strokes in the light. They felt as if your gaze cut through the disguise they had built for years. Not because you tried to see, but because you had lived in the dark before and understood it more than they imagined. As truth revealed itself, you began to notice the natural separation between those who truly belonged in your journey and those who never did. Those who stayed with sincerity shone brighter, while those who came with hidden intentions started to retreat. You did not need to push them away. You did not need to explain. Light never keeps those who choose to live in the half-shadow. In that movement, something inside you changed as well. You no longer felt the need to prove yourself to anyone. No longer felt the need to hold on to relationships that had been decaying for years. No longer felt the urge to defend yourself against stories written by others. Your soul grew wider, calmer, like a lake after a storm. What you once struggled to explain now revealed itself on its own. What you once had to endure now faded on its own. And you understood that sometimes you do not need to fight to win. Simply not striking back is enough for life to place everything where it belongs. In that stillness you felt an expansion within your heart, as if life was preparing a deeper chapter for the path ahead. You did not know what shape that chapter would take, but you felt its movement, felt the breath of something approaching, gentle yet certain. Like the sun before dawn, the light is not visible yet, but it has already begun to touch the layers of the air. And in that moment, as the old ashes faded behind you, you stood tall in the widening light, steady, grounded, ready to step into the deeper levels of the journey only you can walk. The path was opening, not for revenge, not for proof, but to lead you to the place where your soul has long belonged. And as you stepped into that widening light, the invisible movements around you became so clear you could no longer ignore them. It was no longer a vague feeling of change, but direct and sharp signs, as if life were tapping its rhythm on the ground to tell you the truth. Those who once mocked your pain were beginning to taste the very bitterness they had poured out without a second thought. In the stillness where you now stood, fragments of memories you once tried to store away returned to you. You remembered their laughter, the cruel jokes they made when they thought you were not there, the looks that treated your hurt as a small piece of entertainment to fill the emptiness in their lives. In those days they had no idea how heavy your daily burden was. They did not understand the mornings when you had to gather enough courage just to rise. They never knew the nights when you held your pain as if it were the last thing you had left. They believed you were weak, but they had never survived the storm you walked through. And now, as you moved far beyond that old place, what they had done was returning to them like a rain no one could escape. Some woke up to strange mornings feeling a heaviness they could not explain. Some faced betrayal from those they once trusted as allies. Some began to slip inside the very plans they once held with confidence. Each day their downfall became clearer, not as sudden punishment, but as the precise answer life gives to those who treat another's suffering like a game. You took no joy in it. You did not seek revenge. You simply watched with the quiet strength you had forged through being misunderstood, abandoned, torn apart in silence. What was happening to them did not come from you. It came from what Psalm 7:16 had spoken so clearly. The trouble they cause will come back on their own heads. Those words were not there for you to take pleasure in, but to remind you that what you endured was never meaningless. Your pain did not vanish into the void. It became evidence for life to place every piece exactly where it belonged. Now, as you watched them struggle under the weight of what they had once created, you felt a deep shift within yourself. You no longer needed to explain what truly happened to anyone. You no longer felt the urge to say how unfairly you had been treated. What you once wanted to shout so others could understand had become something you no longer needed to carry. Because you could see clearly that truth was speaking for itself without a single word from you. You saw them begin to avoid your eyes. You saw them hurry past you at accidental crossings. You saw them lose the confidence they once had when speaking about you. They did not understand why you were still standing. They did not understand why the pain did not swallow you whole. They did not understand how they had underestimated you so deeply and yet you did not fall. That confusion took away the last support they had. Because when you continued walking with ease, the image they once created of you, fragile, breakable, naive, dissolved like a sketch wiped clean in front of them. Many of them once believed you stood strong because someone helped you, or because of luck, or because you were hiding your inner collapse. But as the pieces of their own lives fell apart like rotten wood, they began to see that your silence had never been a disguise. It was a foundation. It was strength. It was something they did not have and could never steal from you. And then the thing that surprised you most was how they began to look back at themselves. Not with honesty but with fear. They replayed every action, every word, searching for a reason why everything was falling apart now. But they refused to face the simple truth that life was only returning what they had sent out. They blamed bad luck, negative energy, other people, anything except themselves. But even as they tried to hide from the light, the truth shone straight into the cracks they could no longer cover. You watched them from a distance without judgment. You understood that every soul has its own path, and what they were stepping into was not punishment but a lesson. A lesson they once refused to learn because of pride. A lesson they mocked when they saw you go through it. And now that lesson had reached them with a weight that could not be softened, because that is how life moves. Your silence now became a mirror. Not a mirror reflecting them but reflecting you, the one who walked through darkness, who endured trials no one knew and still kept your heart clean. Your pain became the foundation that allowed you to see life with wider eyes. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just clear. And the clearer it became, the more you sensed a shift happening in the spiritual world around you. It felt like the layers of dust that once covered you were being swept away by the wind, revealing a light long hidden. You were no longer buried under the story they wrote about you. You no longer felt the need to race to prove your worth. You only had to exist. Because your existence, strong and steady and bright, was enough to change the sky above you. You also understood that this was not the ending. It was only the surface of a truth being uncovered. And as life continued to guide you into deeper layers of this journey, you would witness even more. Things you once thought impossible. Things you once believed you were not strong enough to face. Things that would make it even clearer that you had always been guided, protected, and held, even in the moments you thought everything had abandoned you. In the quiet of this chapter you stood tall, with a heart no longer aching the same way, with eyes brighter than before, and with the knowing that what was happening now was not a final point but a doorway into the next chapter. A chapter where you would no longer walk as the wounded one but as the one reborn from your own ashes. That quiet rebirth was the moment when deeper layers of truth began to appear before you, not with loud noise but with small movements, sharp as a blade cutting through mist. You started seeing clearly the invisible cords that once wrapped around your life, the strings others used to control, manipulate, and steer you into the dark corners they wanted. You once thought those collisions were only accidents of certain relationships. But now, standing in this new light, you realized everything had been woven with intention, with calculation, with the things they hid under a mask that only looked kind. They once believed they held the strings, that they could pull you in any direction they wished. They thought they were the masterminds in the shadows, the ones directing every development, the ones clever enough to bend circumstances to their will. But what they never considered was that the web they wove had no end point. When they pulled the strings to shove you off your path, their own hands began tightening inside the trap they never saw coming. You saw this not through their actions but through the signs no one but you noticed. Their words started contradicting themselves. The people who once stood with them began to show doubt. The stories they had crafted and edited carefully to damage your name were now being revisited in conversations you did not need to attend. Every person they had used as a chess piece became a mirror reflecting back onto them, no longer willing to stay inside that web. You saw them walking with anxious eyes, like people who know their secrets are showing but do not know when they will be named. They no longer stood tall. They no longer carried confidence. They looked around more, listened more, not because they wanted to learn but because they were afraid. Afraid that someone they once manipulated would say a single careless sentence that exposed everything. Afraid that one day the truth they had chopped into pieces to deceive others would form a full picture before everyone's eyes. You saw them try to patch things up. They spoke more gently. They acted more caring. They behaved more kindly. But you knew that kindness had no weight. It had no soul. It was a curtain they dragged up in desperation when they felt everything collapsing. And that fear-soaked kindness only made their true nature clearer to everyone watching. You did not need to expose them. Reality was doing that on its own. Those who once believed them began realizing that in every story they told the villain was always someone else. Never them. They began asking themselves how one person could be harmed, betrayed and envied by so many unless that person was the source of the chaos. In that silence the relationships that once held tight around them began loosening strand by strand. The world looked at you and them at the same moment like two sides of the same mirror. One side was the light you nurtured in silence, the other was the web they spun with calculation. And when light touched each knot of that web it revealed the rotten spots they had hoped no one would ever see. In that moment your heart became still in a way that felt almost supernatural. Not the stillness of someone accepting loss, but the stillness of someone who has walked through pain long enough to be unshaken by noise. You stood in a field of peace and watched life unfold like a play where the characters were unknowingly acting the roles written for them. No director needed. No guide needed. Every action they took brought them closer to the results of what they had planted. You remembered a verse that once echoed in the dark parts of your life like a faint light in the deepest nights. The wicked in their pride pursue the poor, let them be caught in the schemes they devised. The words of Psalm 10:2 became the most delicate explanation for what you were witnessing. Not a curse. Not punishment. Just law. A law they never believed in, so they never prepared for the moment it returned. What made you strong was not their downfall. You were strong because you did not fall with them when they tried to drag you down. True strength does not come from defeating others. It comes from refusing to let them break the most beautiful parts of you. You kept your essence even when they tried to distort it. You kept your heart even when they tested it with their cruelty. And that steadiness created the widening distance between you and them. That distance was not arrogance. It was growth. You did not leave them. They fell out of your journey on their own. Because the path you were stepping into required purity, clarity and truth, things they had dismissed and no longer had the capacity to hold. And as the web they wove began tightening around them, you felt a lightness in your chest. Not because they were learning a lesson, but because you were no longer trapped in those strings. You stood outside free, looking back at the days you had been isolated, misunderstood, placed in the wrong roles. Now you understood that the pain of those days had become the very thing that set you free today. You also understood that every step you took toward the light made their web feel more out of place. Not because you created comparison, but because light always exposes what darkness cannot bear. And that light, the light of your calmness, your steadiness, your purity, was making them more afraid than anything you could ever say or do. In that movement you knew you were drawing closer to the next depth of your journey. Not a journey against anyone, but the journey of returning to your own soul, to the strength you never knew you had until you walked through all of this. Because in the end what mattered was not how they wove their web. What mattered was that you stepped out of it and stood in a light so wide that no one could ever overshadow you again. And as the light within you became clearer, you began to sense a deeper movement on the other side of the story, where those who once wished for your collapse were being consumed by that very wish. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet downfall, slow but certain, like the ground softening under their feet every time they tried to take another step. What they never realized was that every thought they sent toward you, every word born from jealousy, every dark image they silently hoped you would face, was returning to them in the exact form they created. You saw the first signs in their eyes always searching for reassurance that was never within reach. They tried to cover that instability with a smile, but the smile could not hold for long. The light around you, the same light they once denied and mocked, had now become the mirror that made it impossible for them to pretend. You walked in peace, while the more they tried to stay composed, the more their inner fractures showed. What surprised you most was the truth they did not know. They were never facing you. They were facing the energy they had created themselves. They pushed you down only to slip. They wished loss upon you only to find emptiness in their own lives. They imagined a dark future for you, but the shadow formed behind them instead. You realized that the world never ignores the frequency a soul lives in. They lived through bitterness, so bitterness answered. They sent out poison, so poison returned. And in that current on a quiet morning you felt a strange signal appear on your path. Not a sound, not a voice, but the number 444, 3 repeated digits like the footsteps of an unseen guardian. It appeared on a receipt on a clock in tiny details that seemed meaningless but arrived exactly when you needed confirmation. That number was not just a number, it was a message from the sacred realm that you were protected, that the path you walked could not be shaken by the small things others sent your way. 444 always represents a strong foundation, a shield of angels, a divine guarding meant for souls entering a new chapter of growth. The moment you recognized it, a familiar line rose within you from Psalm 18:2. The Lord is my rock and my fortress. It touched you like the final confirmation that none of what you carried was born alone. It felt like an invisible hand resting gently on your shoulder, not to push you forward or pull you away, but simply to remind you that no spear pointed at you goes unseen by a higher place. As you continued walking, the light within you made the truth on the other side even clearer. Those who once wished for your collapse could no longer sleep a full night. They felt unease like a mist on their skin, clinging to them and making it hard to breathe. They did not understand why their relationships grew tense. Why their smallest plans slid off course. Why the things they once used to weaken you now turned into burdens they could not control. You did not need to look closely to see it. Everything was as clear as sunlight against a glass wall. They were scrambling to clean up the chaos they once believed only you would face. They became cautious with every word, every step, every person. The doubt they had planted in you now clung to them like a shadow they could not cut away. But the deepest truth was not found in their downfall. It was found in you, in the way your essence never changed despite everything you had endured. You did not seek revenge. You did not mock them. You did not bring up the past to salt their wounds. Your heart kept its light alight, not fierce or burning but warm and steady like a lantern guiding you through the forest. That was what made your journey different. You did not turn dark as they did. You were not dragged into the pit they once wanted you to fall into. You stood higher not because you defeated anyone but because you rose above the wounds that once tried to tear you apart. Your light was the result of every moment you chose not to react, every moment you chose silence instead of arguing, every moment you chose healing instead of retaliation. By now your inner journey had crossed into a new threshold where you looked at your life with the eyes of someone who has lived through storms and understands the meaning of wind. Where you no longer cared for the whispers of others. Where the quiet in your heart was strong enough to soften even your tired days. Where you could stand tall without being overshadowed by anyone's darkness. And in this moment, as the story reaches its turning point, something needs to be spoken to those who are listening to you, those walking their own journeys. Share how you feel if you find your name echoed in these layers of the story. If the number 444 has ever appeared on your path, if you have ever found yourself standing firm while the world around you shook, speak up, because every word you write is also a way of confirming your own growth. Leave a message, a small sign that connects your soul to this journey, the way light finds light even when traveling different roads. And if you feel that this story has opened something inside you, stay. Walk with it. Not for noise. Not for habit. But because you are stepping into a chapter your soul has been waiting for. A chapter where every step you take matters. A chapter where you no longer walk alone. Because this light, this journey, this calling, all of it is for you, the chosen one. And the path ahead is only just beginning to open wider than ever before. And as the new chapter opened before you, the movements in their lives became so clear they could no longer deny them. The ones who once raised their glasses when you were hurting now stood before the mirror, unable to look themselves in the eye. Not because you changed, but because the truth they once avoided was shining into every dark corner of their lives. You did not need to speak. You did not need to step closer. Your presence alone made them face what they had done in the days when you were still stumbling. The conversations that once buzzed loudly about you now fell into a heavy silence. The circles that once gathered around them to hear twisted stories about you began stepping back as if they could smell the falseness in the storyteller's own voice. You saw that shift not with your eyes but with the intuition of someone who has learned to sense the real energy behind people after being wounded too many times. You felt each layer, each small movement of truth peeling itself away from the web of lies they had woven. They once wanted you to collapse so they could feel safer, so they would no longer be exposed by your light that highlighted the emptiness in their own souls. But the truth they never considered was simple. When you rose from pain, you became brighter, and they, standing on the platform of their own satisfaction, became dim. They could not bear that, because every victory they thought they had won became meaningless the moment you moved forward without carrying a single shard of what they tried to throw at you. You stood quietly watching, not to compare but to understand that growth does not come from applause. It comes from what you survive in silence. What made you stronger was not their behavior but your refusal to let that behavior define who you were. You did not retaliate, did not cling, did not try to prove anything. You simply kept walking, and that very continuation left them in an emptiness they did not know how to escape. In those days you began to see the isolation forming around them. Friends who once laughed with them now spoke less. Allies who once supported them now looked at them with doubt. The words they once used to attack you became evidence turned against them. And the most ironic part was that they had no idea why it was happening. They thought the world had turned on them. They thought someone was speaking ill of them. They thought they were victims of unfairness. But you knew the truth was much simpler. The seeds they planted sprouted at the exact moment they were meant to, and now they were only harvesting the season they cultivated with their own bitterness. You saw them search for comfort in the very things they once mocked. They sought spiritual advice. They read healing words they once called weak. They played calm music they once laughed at for being shallow. But none of it touched them, because they were living in the frequency of panic, a frequency that cannot receive light until the soul stops and faces its own darkness. In that moment, in your quiet observation, a verse from Psalm 34:17 rose like a gentle breeze. The righteous cry out, the Lord hears them and delivers them from all trouble. Not a call for revenge. Not a declaration of victory. Just a reminder that every soul connected to light is seen, is held, is carried through places unseen by others. And that promise was not only for you. It was for anyone who ever suffered in silence under burdens they did not deserve. You understood something more important than anything else. Light does not need to compete. Light does not need to rush. Light does not need to shout to be known. Light only needs to exist, and darkness knows it must retreat. You also understood that your peace today did not come from their collapse. It came from no longer being part of stories that were never yours. You finally stood in a place where you knew your worth was not in the eyes of others, not in the words they created, not in the image they tried to force on you. That freedom let you see the world with a broader vision. You saw the people who once believed them pulling back, not because of anything you did but because the trust they placed in the wrong person had cracked. You saw those who once left you beginning to understand what they did not see before. But you did not wait for them to return. You did not hope for apologies. You did not need explanations. You had already gone farther than where they left you. And that distance did not create superiority. It created peace. Day after day you felt more clearly the quiet power of truth. It does not come quickly, but once it arrives nothing can stop it. It comes like the sky brightening after a long night, not rushed but undeniable. And in that light everything returned to its rightful place. You stood tall, and they stood before the fragments of what they had created. The most beautiful part was not that they paid a price. The beauty was that you no longer hurt because of them. You had become bigger, deeper, brighter. And that made every wound that once struck you a witness to a transformation nothing could stop. You saw life with a lighter, fuller heart, as if you had finally found the rhythm of your own breath. And as you moved forward, your journey unfolded not only upward but inward, where you no longer walked only with your feet but with a soul strengthened by seasons of storms. Because you understood that from here on light was not just something you carried. It was something you had become. And as the light within you became impossible to hide, another shift began among the people who once stood with them and against you. Not a loud change. Not dramatic confrontations. Just quiet steps backward, glances that shifted conversations that suddenly fell silent when they entered the room. No one said a word, yet everyone felt something had slipped off its original axis. What they could not see before was becoming clearer each day. The people who once eagerly listened to stories meant to smear your name now grew uneasy when recalling the details. What once sounded convincing now felt suspicious. The smiles that once encouraged their tales faded because they began to realize only one person was always at the center of every conflict, every misunderstanding, every rumor, and that person was not you. You did not need to prove anything. You did not have to untie each knot. You did not need to stand before a crowd and say you were misunderstood. Life itself was lifting each piece, revealing what they tried to hide. You stood at a distance, quiet and observant, watching the ropes that once bound you begin to rot away. You once thought those who believed their lies were betrayers. But now you saw the truth. They did not betray you, they simply did not have enough light to distinguish real from false. And as your light grew brighter, their confusion naturally dissolved. Not because you persuaded them, but because truth always finds its way out, no matter how many wrong paths it must travel. The one who once stood at the center of the web against you began to feel its weight. They no longer received the support they once enjoyed. No more easy nods. No one willing to listen to their stories. Each time they spoke about you, the room became heavy, as if everyone could hear the cracking sound in their own voice. You sensed this not with your eyes but with the intuition of someone who has endured isolation and knows what it feels like to walk alone in darkness. The more you watched, the more you understood that their panic did not come from the changes around them. It came from the change within you. When you were no longer hurt by them, they lost the only power they ever had. When you stood calm and bright, they no longer knew where to place you in the script they had written. And as truth revealed itself piece by piece, they realized they could no longer control what they once believed they held tightly. It was not only their relationships shaking. Their inner world was breaking as well. You could feel it in every glance they avoided, every forced smile they tried to maintain, every recycled sentence they repeated as if hoping old words could save the collapsing present. But no one wants to stand beside someone carrying the energy of a lie that has been exposed. When truth breaks open, it is not their stories about you that ruin them. It is the emptiness within them that light finally reveals. In those days of watching everything shift, you heard inside your heart the whisper of Psalm 31:20. You hide them in the secret place of your presence from the schemes of men. The words came just when you understood that everything you thought was abandonment was actually protection. Those who left you were not acting against you. They were being guided out of your life so they would not harm you further. Every lonely stretch you walked was not a sign of unworthiness but a place where you were hidden so their hands could not reach you again. You saw this most clearly when the one who once gathered crowds to stand against you began isolating themselves. The voices that once echoed their words grew quiet. The roles they once held lost their credibility. The stories they once told became brittle leaves falling apart at the slightest touch. And the most painful thing for them was not the silence of others but your silence. Because in that silence they had no one left to blame, no one left to push responsibility onto, no one left to continue their performance. The changes in their lives came not because you won. They came because you stopped fighting in the way they needed you to. When you did not respond, they lost their stage. When you did not react, they lost their role. When you stood still, they no longer knew who to fight. And when light surrounded you, they had no choice but to face their own darkness without anyone to shield them. What strengthened you most in that moment was the softness in your heart, the feeling that you were no longer carrying what did not belong to you. No more resentment. No more bitterness. No more hoping someone would return to fix what they broke. You had moved past the phase of needing to be understood, defended, or validated. Now all you needed was freedom from their story, from their gaze, from anything that once tried to pull you downward. You did not wish for them to learn a lesson. You did not need them to face consequences. You simply knew that truth had placed a boundary between you and them that could not be erased. You walked toward light and they walked toward the place where they had to face themselves. Those two paths no longer crossed, no longer tilted toward each other, no longer held each other back. And that brought no sadness, only inevitability. You kept walking, leaving behind the tremors of relationships that had reached their expiration, stories that had grown old, roles that no longer fit. Ahead of you was open space, free of noise, free of others' shadows clinging to you. You stepped into the quiet field of truth where you were not merely surviving but living more deeply, more clearly, more gently. Because when every voice that once rose against you goes silent, when every gaze that once judged you turns away, you finally understand that life is clearing a path for you to leave the old orbit and rise into a higher one where you are no longer a character in someone else's story but the one who writes the next chapter of your own. And as your path led you into deeper light, the truth revealed itself in a new way. No longer just through the collapse of rumors or the withdrawal of the crowd, but through the consequences faced by the hands that once tried to rewrite the story of your life. They did not simply want to hurt you. They wanted to control the way the world saw you, to bend the direction you were walking, to shape each step you took as if you were only a character in a book they believed they had the right to author. But when they reached into a story that was never theirs to touch, their own world began to crack along lines they never expected. You remembered the moments they inserted themselves into places you were standing. Meeting rooms. Small gatherings. Conversations where they always found a way to appear just in time to twist a sentence, alter a detail, shift perception so you would be placed in the wrong position. Someone else might have broken under that weight of distortion. But you did not. You stayed silent, watching the pieces of their crafted story fall apart around you, knowing that truth always gathers itself back to where it belongs. What frightened them most was not that you stood firm but that you refused to react the way they predicted. When they rewrote your story, they expected you to struggle. But you didn't. You let their version drift by like muddy water that could never touch the clear depths beneath. You knew anything built on deception could not hold its shape for long. And that was exactly what happened. The structure they built began peeling away like thin paint, unable to survive the sun of reality. You watched them try to keep control, patching the cracks with new layers of disguise. But the more they patched, the clearer the breaks became. Those who once believed them now saw the strain in every story they told, the unnatural tone in every excuse. The more they spoke, the more obvious it became that they were the ones slipping away from their own path. You did not wish for any of this, but you understood something. When someone grasps your life with a pen that does not belong to them, they lose the pages of their own. And that was what you were seeing. They no longer knew where they were going, what they wanted, or what they were even fighting for. They chased the desire to control you until they lost control of themselves. And when the story they built collapsed, they were left with nothing to cling to. You saw them lost inside their own lives. Doors that once opened for them now closed in strange ways. People who once supported them now looked at them with caution. Opportunities they once held tightly slipped through their fingers like water they could not contain. They tried knocking on new doors, but no answer came. Not because the world rejected them, but because they had stepped off the path meant for them, the path they abandoned the moment they intruded into your story. In those days you realized silence can be a miracle. Not a miracle to punish anyone, but a miracle to keep you from becoming who they wanted you to become. Silence helped you stay in your true position so life could rearrange the pieces for you. You were not dragged into the battle they tried to provoke. You were not swept into the chaos they created. You stood outside it, where the air was clear and the sky above you wide. The further you walked, the more you understood that they never had the right to write your story. No one does. Every soul carries its own path, its own rhythm, its own horizon that opens only for the one brave enough to step forward. And when someone forces their way into that path, they lose their own rhythm. That broken rhythm was what you were seeing now in their wandering eyes, their hidden exhaustion, the disappointment they could not mask no matter how they smiled. They did not understand why everything felt heavy. Why doors that once opened now closed. Why their words no longer held weight. But you understood. Life never rewards manipulation, and it never allows one soul to write on the pages of another. Each person can only hold the story of their own life, not the story of someone who was chosen. On a quiet afternoon, you stood beside an open window watching clouds drift by like old chapters leaving your life. You felt the relief of knowing you no longer had to explain, no longer had to fix the consequences of someone else's choices. What they did no longer fell on your shoulders. What they said no longer bent your steps. They walked out of your life in the same way they once hoped you would fall. You kept moving forward, carrying clarity, growth, and the calm that had been forged in you. You did not look back. Not because you forgot, but because your life was moving toward a direction they could never follow. You stepped toward the place where the next chapter waited, a place where no one had the right to hold the pen except you. And in that wide open space you understood something deeper than anything before. No one can rewrite the journey of the chosen, because their story is protected from heights others cannot reach. And it is in that moment that true freedom began to unfold before you. And as you stepped into the deepest part of your journey, where light and darkness meet without blending, you began to see clearly a truth you once only sensed in fragments. There were hands that did not stop at words, did not stop at slander, did not stop at manipulation. They reached for darker pathways, shortcuts they believed would break you, confuse you, or dim the light within you. In their hearts, jealousy had grown into something heavier than malice. They did not just want you to suffer. They wanted you erased from your own path. You did not need details. You did not need to dig. The signs always came at the right moments. Nights when your body felt exhausted for no reason. Mornings when you woke as if someone had tried to hold your breath. Moments when the air around you felt thick and heavy, then suddenly cleared after a silent prayer. None of it was imagined. They were signs of energy that did not belong to you, trying to find a way in. What they did not understand, and never will, is that the soul of a chosen one does not operate in the lower realm where toxic thoughts can cling. Your light is not a gentle spark that fear can extinguish. It is the light of someone who has survived storms they could not endure for a single night. It is the light of steadiness, purity, and inner discipline they are not capable of imitating. And that very light is what sends everything they send back to where it came from. It has no place to anchor itself. It cannot break you. It cannot pierce the unseen barrier that has protected your soul for a long time. You felt this most clearly on days that seemed heavy but never overwhelming. Because right after each heaviness came a breeze of ease, as if someone were brushing away the dust that tried to cling to you. You did not have to fight. You only had to stand upright. And when you stand upright, what does not belong to you falls away on its own, the way darkness cannot cling to a flame. Meanwhile, the ones who reached into darkness failed to understand one simple truth. Any energy summoned with harmful intent will find its way back to the place where it was created. Not immediately, but inevitably. Not loudly, but unavoidably. What they thought was a weapon became an uninvited guest, one that refused to leave, clinging to the corners of their own lives, tiring their minds, shortening their breath, expanding the shadows inside them. You saw the shift from afar. You saw the way they avoided silent corners. The way they startled at the sight of their own reflection. The way they tried to steady their breathing but could not. Not because they were being mystically punished, but because their souls had opened a door to something they could not control. They did not understand that darkness is loyal to no one. It serves no one. It only looks for a place to settle. And because you gave it no place to stand, it returned to the place it was invited. Each day you felt the reversal more clearly. They grew weary while you grew lighter. They grew confused while your clarity sharpened. They fell into the very places they once wished for you. And the most surprising part was that you felt no hatred. No satisfaction. No triumph. You simply saw truth moving according to a rhythm no one can interrupt. And you knew that if you held on to resentment you would share the same frequency as them. But you did not. You kept your heart calm because peace is the one place darkness cannot reach. One day you stood before a wide window watching the light touch the edge of the table and rise slowly across the room. In that moment you understood that light itself was the reason you no longer feared what once came your way. Light reveals. Light cleanses. Light releases. And within that light every threat becomes nothing more than a quiet shadow. You remembered the days you felt attacked by something unseen, and now you realize those moments were only the final steps of an old chapter before you stepped fully into a new one. Those shadows never touched your soul. Never pulled you off your path. Never made you forget your worth. They did not blind you. They helped you see more clearly what you already knew. Nothing given to you from the deeper layers of the universe can be taken away by anyone. Looking back you saw that the journey was never about proving your strength. It was about realizing you had always been protected. The moments you thought were fatigue were moments of cleansing. The heaviness you felt was the release of things that did not belong to you. And those very moments shaped you, deepened you, strengthened you for a chapter your soul was not ready to face until now. You continued moving forward, not looking back, not measuring loss or gain. You knew that what they sent out had become lessons for themselves. And what you carried was only light. Light that does not need protection, only steadiness. Light that does not need to fight, only to stand. Light that does not need to prove itself, only to exist. And as you crossed the threshold of this part of the journey you felt clearly that the next door was opening. Not for you to escape the dark, but for you to step deeper into the realm of light your soul had long been traveling toward. Because in the end you are not the one who runs. You are the one who stands between two worlds, carrying something no darkness can extinguish. And then as your journey carried you to the final threshold of this chapter, a sacred stillness settled around you, not like night closing in but like dawn unfolding. The light was no longer the fierce brightness that met you when you escaped the darkness, nor the trembling glow from the days you struggled to find yourself again. It had become softer, deeper, wider, as if the universe itself were clearing a path for you to enter the part of life your soul had been promised long ago. You stood in that open space and realized that everything you endured was never meant to prove anything to anyone. It was meant to help you hear the voice inside you. The voice once buried beneath pain, betrayal, and the noise of those who knew nothing about your path yet still tried to choose it for you. Now that voice rose clearly like a guiding thread leading you into the new light. You felt that everything around you had changed. Not because the world shifted, but because you did. What once terrified you had become small. What once made you doubt yourself had faded into shadows. What once seemed like a wrong turn now revealed itself as the stepping stone that lifted you to this moment, the place of maturity, clarity, and peace that nothing could shake. In that moment a line from Psalm 37:4 drifted in softly like a breeze. Delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. It was no longer just a verse in a holy book. It was confirmation of everything you had walked through. When you stopped seeking approval from others, when you stopped leaning on unstable hands, when you chose to walk in your own honesty, goodness began opening for you on its own, as if it had been waiting for you all along. Looking back you saw that your journey had never been straight. There were stretches so dark you thought you were abandoned. There were rough parts that forced you to pause again and again. There were long distances you had to walk alone with no one beside you, no hand holding yours. Yet in those very stretches you were shaped, refined, taught to see the world with the eyes of someone who had lived through both wounds and miracles. You understood that each pain that touched you carried a small gift. Not a gift received in the moment, but a gift that opened only when you had grown enough to understand it. Loss taught you what truly mattered. Betrayal taught you who was worthy of staying. Misunderstanding taught you how to stand firm without needing anyone to defend you. And the invisible shadows that once pressed against you revealed the strength of the unseen protection that had always surrounded you. Those who once used your name as a target, who twisted your story, who hoped to see you fall, now existed only as chapters long closed. You no longer felt anger. You no longer wished for their understanding. You no longer needed their apology. Because you knew they were never capable of seeing the path you were walking. Each person can only see as far as the light they carry within, and their light was never enough to understand your journey. The greatest strength you gained was the ability to release them. Release was not surrender. Release was the recognition that not everyone belongs in your final story. Some people enter only to play small roles: the role of challenge, the role of mirror, the role of awakening. And once their role is done, they must leave the stage so you can continue toward your own light. You moved forward with a heart strengthened in the deepest way. A heart no longer afraid of isolation. No longer weighed down by misunderstanding. No longer shattered by harsh words. A heart that knew everything that happened was guiding you toward the form you were always meant to become. Then, gently but with a force that resonated like a bell struck deep in the earth, you understood the greatest message of your entire journey. You were never abandoned. Even when you thought you were walking alone, an unseen hand kept you from falling. A light shone on places you could not see. A protection covered every step, even on nights when you cried and no one knew. You understood this more clearly as you felt a new layer of peace settle over your heart, a peace not born from circumstances but from knowing your soul had grown larger than any darkness that once tried to surround you. You carried a maturity no one could steal, a clarity no one could dim, a strength no one could destroy. You stood in that light with gratitude swelling in your chest and whispered a final truth to yourself. The road ahead is no longer the road of someone wounded, but the road of someone who understands the meaning of every wound. No longer the path of someone running from darkness, but the path of someone carrying light through the darkness without losing themselves. And now, as this chapter closes, you are invited to leave a small imprint, not to retell the past but to mark your own growth. If any part of this journey touched you, if any word awakened a memory, if any spark of light rose within you, share it. Not for others to see, but for you to acknowledge that you have risen, you have stood, you have stepped into the light meant for you. And as a final blessing, this chapter closes with a verse that has carried many souls along their road. Psalm 121:7. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your soul. This is not the end of the story. It is the opening of your next chapter, the chapter you enter not with a wounded heart but with a heart reborn in light.
Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.